Crocheting 101, How to Crochet for Complete Beginners. Brought to you by Club Crochet and produced by Louie's Loops. That's me. How to crochet a simple coaster. For our third project in Crocheting 101, we'll be playing around with increases and working in the round to make these coasters. The materials that you'll need are some worsted weight yarn and a size G 4mm crochet hook, although this pattern will work with pretty much any size hook and yarn as long as they match up. You'll also need some scissors and a needle to sew in the ends. In this project, we'll also be dipping our toes into how to read patterns, which are basically the blueprints to a project. In patterns, we often use abbreviations for stitches to make it easier to write and to read. Here's the stitches you'll need to know how to make and their abbreviations: the chain stitch, the single crochet, and the increase. We'll also be going over a new stitch called the slip stitch, but I'll be teaching you that when we get there. Okay, to start out, after making our slip knot, chain 2. Now we'll move on to round 1. Rounds and rows are the way patterns are split up. So when I say round 1, think of it as step 1. Rounds are for working in the round, which we are, and rows are for working in the flat. For our first round, single crochet 6 times into the second chain from the hook, right here. Because we're working in the round for this project, we won't have to turn for the entire project. This might get a bit confusing to tell where the ends of the rounds are, so before we continue, grab a stitch marker like this, or use an extra strand of yarn, and thread it into the final stitch we made to mark where the end of the round is. Now let's count the stitches around to make sure we're doing it right. See this little number in parentheses? This is the number of stitches that you'll have by the end of the round. So in this case, 6 stitches. Look for these little V's. These are the stitches. Okay, for round 2, we'll be making an increase into each stitch around, meaning single crocheting twice into the same stitch. The first stitch from round 1 can be a little tough to get into, and you might need to use your nail to tweak it over the hook. Make sure to just put 2 stitches into each stitch, not 1 or 3, because this can really screw up your final count. There will be 6 increases total, meaning that by the end, we'll have 12 stitches total. Now count around and make sure that you have 12 stitches total. And move the stitch marker up to the end of round 2. For round 3, we'll be single crocheting 1 in the first stitch, and then increasing in the next, and repeating that 6 times total. Notice how it's written in brackets with repeat 6 times total after it. This is how I write repetitions. It means keep doing what you're doing in the brackets 6 times. Sometimes it's written as x6 or times 6. There are a bunch of ways you can keep track of this. Our stitch marker helps, of course, but also try keeping count, making an increase in every other stitch. There is a third way that I keep track of stitches without using a stitch marker at all, which we'll be talking about after this round. Once you're done with this round, move the stitch marker up. For round 4, we'll be single crocheting 1 in the first 2 stitches, and then increasing in the next, and repeating that 6 times total to end up at 24 stitches by the end. You might start to see a pattern here. We're adding a single crochet between increases for each round, a pattern that will continue till the end. So check this out. We're putting our increases into the second stitch from the increase in the round before. Let's look closer at our stitches. This is a single crochet. You can see that there's just one V going into that hole. And this is an increase. You can tell that there are two V's going into one spot. This pattern is awesome because all the increases in each round, all the way for the entire project, are going where that second stitch from the increase before is, right here. So it'll look like our increases are continuing on in the same spot all the way up. But this pattern is awesome for another reason too. Like I said before, we're adding one single crochet in each round in between increases. In round 3, it was just one single crochet, and now there are two single crochets. This is how I crochet without using stitch markers at all. If you add the single crochets from one increase to the next, you'll have 4 stitches, 2 single crochets and 1 increase, which is 2 single crochets together. And we're on round 4. So if you count the number of single crochets between increases and add 2 to account for the increase, you'll get the number of the round that you're currently on for this pattern. By keeping track of that, you can continue on without using a stitch marker at all, as long as you're making sure that your increases are going where they're supposed to. Now, I don't suggest that you continue on for the next few rounds without a stitch marker, because you're just getting started. But just be on the lookout for where your increases are and where your single crochets are, and the difference between the two. This is going to be a vital skill to have in the future, I promise. Not all people's patterns do this with their increases though. I try to make it easier for counting and going back, but not everyone will be putting their increases where their previous increases were, so be wary. When we get to the end of this round, I'm not going to take the stitch marker out, and instead I'm going to crochet around it, so I can show you how you can tell where the end of the round is, but you might want to move it up. For round 5, you'll continue the pattern by single crocheting 3 and increasing 1, and repeating that 6 times total to end up at 30 stitches total. Like I said in chapter 4, a good rule to follow when starting out is to increase in each round by the number of stitches that you started with in round 1, in our case 6. This keeps you increasing at a steady rate. This is going to make sure that your piece is flat. But if you put too little increases in your piece, it'll start to bend in. And by putting too many increases, it'll start to bend out. We'll be playing with this a bit more in our next project though when we make a sphere or a hacky sack. Okay, so our stitch marker is right here, marking the end of the round. But let's pretend that we didn't have the stitch marker there and continue on round 6 without knowing that it was the end of the round. As we continue on, if we thought we were on round 5, we would make 3 single crochets and then an increase. But if we did that, our increase wouldn't go into the right spot. It would look disjointed from the rest of the pattern. This is where noticing the difference between increases and single crochets can really come in handy. Now I know that I must be on round 6, because there now needs to be 4 single crochets between increases to make sure that the increases are even. So for round 6, single crochet 4 and increase 1, repeating that 6 times total and ending up at 36 stitches total. Okay, now test yourself. I'm going to go ahead and make our final round, round 7, off camera without giving you the instructions first. If you think you know what to do, then pause it here and go for it. If you're unsure, I'll explain it when I get back. Okay, for round 7, we single crocheted 5 and increased 1, and repeated that 6 times total to end up at 42 stitches around. Now I'm going to add a handle so we can hang our coaster on a hook somewhere. But to do that, we need to go back 3 stitches. So pull out our final increase and a single crochet. Okay, now chain 10. When you look at a chain, there are 3 parts to it. The top loop here, the bottom loop here, and the back loop back here. Find the first chain we made, and in the back loop of the first chain here, you'll slip stitch 1. For a slip stitch, you just insert the hook, yarn over, and pull the loop through all the loops on the hook. This is going to connect the chains and make a ring. Now we can refinish round 7 by redoing a single crochet and an increase. Okay, one last thing. We're going to be making an invisible end, so you can't tell where the round begins and ends. To do that, we'll slip stitch into the next stitch right here. Cut the yarn. And pull it all the way through. Now thread it on a needle. Go around the back of the next stitch and into the center of the slip stitch that we just made. Now proceed to hide the end in like we did for our mini bow. And cut the end close to the piece so it's totally hidden. And now we have a little coaster. So you can't make an excuse for why you didn't use one. Crocheting 101's home, clubcrochet.com, was created by my awesome friends over at Market House. Not only did they build out the amazing membership and online courses website, but they mentored and advised me along the way, and I so much appreciate them for that. Grow your brand and build your business with Market House, specializing in web design and digital marketing. Check them out at mkt.house. Thank you so much for watching. Crocheting 101 was independently created by me, Louie, with the support from my more than awesome Kickstarters that you can see on the screen now. This project took a really long time to complete, so if you liked it, please let me know by liking the video down below and subscribing and following Louie's Loops on any social media. Alright, when you're ready to move on, check out the next chapter down below or on the screen now. Pasta la pizza and happy hooking!